And that was Riding Home with the Reader. We are live off the floor at Conquerall Music. Welcome to the Conquerall Mills Music Show on 88.7 Cove FM and online at covefm.com. On tonight's show, I am featuring the fingerstyle guitar playing magic of Bob Ardern.
guys are great. You want to go on the road?
That song was Matilda's Dance by our guest tonight, Bob Ardern. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Bob. Let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here. Thanks you for inviting me on the show and hosting, of course.
Oh, thank you so much. Let's stop being overly polite to each other and let's talk a little bit here. I want to know, Bob, how did you get your start in music?
Oh, back when dinosaurs were still the dominant life forms on the planet, I took piano lessons when I was a kid from age, I think, 7 or 8 until I was about 13. And then stopped doing music for about 3 years, and then picked up the guitar. Actually, me and Brian Adams, I was thinking about it the other day, his song, The Summer of '69, played it till I got my first real six string, played it till my fingers bled, and it was the summer of '69. I went through that exact same thing. So picked up a guitar in 1969 and played it. So that's kind of how I got started, and I've been playing on and off ever since.
Well, it's good that you got your start in music because that has brought you here to us tonight. What is the next tune you're going to play for us, Bob? And can you maybe tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. I'll just drop the tuning a little bit. Going from open C major to open C minor, if you're taking notes. This one is called Matushka, which is a Russian word meaning little mother. And it was inspired because I had been reading a biography of Catherine the Great for whatever reason. And it got me sort of into a Russian... I live with a Ukrainian woman, so there's a little Ukrainian-Russian influence on this one.
And that song was called Matushka by Bob Ardern. Bob, obviously, as a musician, you're drawing inspiration from a variety of sources, and I'm wondering, how do you convey your subject matter without the use of words in some of your songs? How do you kind of, what does the music do to push that meaning forward? Really simple question for you.
Yeah, I actually don't think about it very much because what ends up happening is the imagery that runs through my brain when I'm composing stuff inevitably is not necessarily the imagery that runs through other people's brains when they listen to the music. It's actually quite interesting. I love talking to people at live performances to get their impressions of what they see or what they hear going through their minds when they listen to my music. I've noticed a lot of times people sit and listen to my music with their eyes closed. And I'm always interested in what goes through their minds. For example, the first piece I played, which was Matilda's Dance, obviously comes from Waltzing Matilda. I'm sure you recognize the theme. I didn't start out to write Waltzing Matilda, but what I was doing is one of the little musical phrases in the middle of the song reminded me of Waltzing Matilda. And I thought, well, if it is Waltzing Matilda, why don't we just steal it unashamedly, since it's in the public domain, incorporate it into the song, and then weave my own little pieces in and out of it. People recognize, obviously, Waltzing Matilda. With Matushka, which I just played, as I say, it has a sort of Slavic, Ukrainian, Russian sound to it, just because I was reading about Catherine the Great while I was composing it.
So, and you definitely can hear that come through, especially in Matushka, that sort of haunting sort of sound to it, which is really very pretty and awesome. That's a good choice for you tonight, I think. And for the songs that you play just instrumentally, is there a reason that you don't put lyrics to those songs? Is there a conscious decision there, or have you ever written a piece of music, thought, I'm going to put words to this, and then decided to leave words out of it?
Well, it actually goes back to why I do instrumental music rather than I do sing, which you're about to hear. But a long time ago when I was playing, I wasn't a particularly good singer. I'm still not a great singer. And people used to come up to me and they would say, your guitar playing is really good. You should focus on that, which was, I broke the code, which says your singing isn't really up to par. So I thought, well, okay, if this is a weak point, let's leave it out of the whole thing and do some instrumentals. And I ended up with an instrumental CD. It was well received, and I said, okay, let's keep doing this. It's so I'm coming from a singer-songwriter background, but the guitar playing is obviously what I'm strongest at. So I just focus on it. That's all.
So let's have another song, and you said this one you're going to sing in for us a little bit? Yeah,
it's called Senses of You, and my partner Julia told me I should write a love song, which I don't do particularly well. If you want a love song, go see Barry Manilow, Paul McCartney. They're professionals at it. Mm-hmm. But in the interest of marital harmony, I thought, well, I should do what Julia asked, or at least make a stab at it. And they say write what you know, so this is a breakup song. And it's not about Julia. I can still see your face when I close my eyes. It's always glistened with tears. Your number's on a note by the phone. Mine's a voice you don't want to hear. Sometimes wonder where it all went wrong. Couldn't give you what you wanted all along. I can no longer dry your tears. I can still see your face when I close my eyes. still hear you breathe when I close my eyes. Not used to being on my own. Stare at the ceiling 'cause I can't get to sleep. Hearing the wind, feeling forlorn. You needed a lifeline from being alone. You might have stayed with me if only I'd known. I can no longer greet your dawn. Can still hear you breathe when I close my eyes. Touch of your fingers, the sound of your laughter, the light in your eyes whenever you smile, the scent of your perfume when you sat beside me. I was wrapped in the sense of you all the while. Still feel your heart when I close my eyes. On the porch as twilight grows. Turn out the lights, look at the stars. There'll be a time I can let go. Taste of the wine at the end of the day. Taste of your kiss has barely started to fade. I can no longer fill your glass. Can still feel your heart. Can still hear you breathe. Can still see your face when I close my eyes.
And that was Senses of You by Bob Ardern. We are going to take a short break. Keep it tuned to Cove for more music with Bob after these messages. And we are back on the Conquerall Mills Music Show with our featured performer, Bob Ardern. Thanks again for coming into the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Back in 2015, you released your most recent album called 8 Winds, and I'm wondering if you can tell me and the listeners at home and our studio audience a little bit about that project, starting with the story behind the title.
The story behind the title fell out of actually the first track on the CD. The first track is called Zephyr, which is a wind, and I was looking for a title, and my music tends to end up in new age instrumental radio stations as well as live performances, and they like new agey kinds of things. So I thought, well, what can I come up with in the way of a title? And so I just started looking around and discovered that way back in medieval times in the Mediterranean, too many meds all at once, they had names for the 8 points of the compass, the cardinal points of the compass. They had names for those winds. So the north wind and the south wind, west, east, northwest, and so on. So that's kind of interesting. And winds blowing from all directions. And I happened to have a photograph that I had taken of clouds in the sky. I thought, oh, it fits. So it all just sort of fell into place.
And actually, that album was awarded the Best Instrumental Acoustic Album. It was at the 12th Annual Music Reporter Awards in New Orleans. And I'm wondering, how did it get nominated how did you get nominated for that, other than being supremely talented?
Well, Zone Music Reporter is a reporting organization that keeps track of radio play in the sort of new age instrumental world, jazz music. So the CD went out to a whole bunch of radio stations as part of my promo when I released it. And it hit on the ZMR charts and was eligible for nomination. Made it through the first round onto the short list of 5, and at the end of it all, there's an award show. It's kind of like the Grammys, but a specialty for new age and world and instrumental music. And they have an award show, kind of like the Grammys, with mostly that instrumental music. And I guess people liked it because it was voted the best. So I'm incredibly grateful to a whole bunch of radio program hosts for voting for it.
And were you actually able to go to New Orleans to accept the award when the time came through? Or
yeah, because it would have been really awful to win and not be there. So there was a folk music conference that I wanted to go to in North Carolina, at the weekend after, 2 weekends after. So I thought, well, let's turn it into a holiday. It's in May. We're getting out of the cold, wet spring in Nova Scotia. Let's go down to New Orleans and then up to North Carolina, and took a few days and loafed along the Florida Panhandle and got some vacation time. So yeah, I was there.
That's excellent. So when you cross the border and they ask, are you here on business or pleasure, you were able to say both. Or it was more just pleasure and pleasure.
Don't get me started on crossing the border. We could take up the rest of the show on that one.
Well, I'm going to turn things back over to you, Bob. What are you going to play for us next?
Next piece is called Nova Scotia New Age Blues. And the history behind that is my first CD ended up in the hands of a reviewer in Thule, Utah, of all places. And he coined the phrase based on the last track on the album of my music, or the CD called Wires, Rosewood, and Roots, is Nova Scotian New Age Blues. And I thought, well, I may be the only practitioner of Nova Scotian New Age Blues, and if I am, I better have a theme song. So I sat down and wrote Nova Scotian New Age Blues. Not really blues, but... Thank you.
And that song was called Nova Scotia New Age Blues by our guest tonight, Bob Ardern. In preparing for this episode, I seem to say this every episode in preparing for this episode, but I usually do prepare. So in getting ready to do this episode, and just by following you on Facebook, because I have been following you for about the last 2 or 3 years since I've had my business here, I see that you do a lot of work with David Finlay in Lunenburg, who I know, based on knowing him on Facebook, does lots of film scoring and music for television and all sorts of cool projects like that. And I was wondering, how did your working relationship with him come about?
It started because I had enough instrumentals to do my first CD. And again, words of wisdom from my partner, Julia. She said, 12 guitar solos is going to sound a little bit boring. You need to add some other instrumentation. Maybe you should look for a producer who can do some more to it. And I looked actually on the Music Nova Scotia website to see if there were any producers listed that might be able to help me with it. And David's was one of the names I found. And the fact that he lives in Lunenburg, I can walk to his studio from my house, was incredibly convenient. And I went over to see him one day just to meet him, talk with him, see what his ideas were. Took him some samples of what the music was, and he said, yeah, we could do something with that. And we tinkered around with it a little bit. And I went home and I said to Julia, I think this is going to work. He thinks the way I do. So musically, we are quite well attuned. I will frequently walk into the studio and tell him what I'm hearing over and above other instrumentations. And, yeah, that'll work. Or I won't tell him what I'm thinking, and he will say, I'm thinking this needs a tuba. Well, I hadn't thought of a tuba, but damn it, it's going to work. So, yeah. So it's just a case of he's been at music far longer than he would like me to tell over the air. But he's got 2 degrees in music. He's been in the music business recording for all of his working life, essentially, and just a fabulously talented producer and recording engineer, but also a very talented musician as well. He frequently writes the parts that go along with the other instrumentation on my CD. So I've written the basic melody and the guitar parts, and he's come up with the other parts.
And since you started working with him, and even beforehand, has collaboration always been a big part of your songwriting, or do you work on things yourself and then bring it to other people, or how does that process work?
On the singer-songwriter stuff that I've done before I became mostly instrumental, I never collaborated on my songwriting. I used to belong to a songwriters group when I lived in Ontario, where we would bring new songs to the group, and they'd get kicked around in the group and get feedback on them. But it was feedback rather than saying, well, I've got half a song here and I don't know where to go with it, so give it to somebody else and collaborate with it. So I did get feedback, but with Dave on the musical compositions, I get the guitar parts all done, and then I go to him and he says, wait, we need this or we need that, and as I say, he comes up with the other parts. So I sort of sit back and give him a free hand.
That sounds like you've got a good working relationship, which always makes things a lot smoother.
It is, yes.
What is the next song that you plan to play for us?
Well, speaking of tubas, I mentioned that because of the piece I'm about to play. When I was composing it, I wasn't quite sure what rhythm to put it in, and it ended up in a ragtime rhythm on guitar. So it's a ragtime guitar piece. And Dave said, it needs a tuba. I knew it needed the stride piano, which it's got. And he said, and I was thinking it should have some bottom end bass line of some kind. And he said, well, let's do the bass line with a tuba. So it's a little bit of Nova Scotian ragtime meets Preservation Hall. So the title is Nova Scotia New Age Ragtime.
And that was Nova Scotia New Age Ragtime by my guest tonight, Bob Ardern. I noticed that you draw on many genres of music stylistically, some jazz, some Celtic, some folk. Your bio speaks of your love for the tradition of English folk and also your introduction to American folk. I'm wondering, do you view one of those traditions as more important than the other, or do they sort of coexist together?
Oh, they absolutely coexist. Neither one of them is more important. I got into English folk music because I was born in England and discovered folk music in the golden age of the sort of 60s and 70s, 1960s and 1970s. And a lot of the people that I listened to, because of my English heritage, were English folkies. And guys like Al Stewart, before he became famous with Year of the Cat, John Martin, Bert Jansch, John Renbourn, names that are on everybody's list of fabulous folk singers from that era. Gordon Lightfoot, obviously, in the Canadian side. And then when I got back into guitar playing after a little absence, of course, I was hanging out with my folk music loving friends, and they introduced me to some of the American musicians that I've started following as well. So there is no preference for one or the other. They certainly they're different styles. There's English folk music, not the sort of traditional English folk music with 29 verses and 2 chords, as opposed to 29 chords and 2 verses, which are Steely Dan songs. They're the sort of contemporary folk music and American folk music. There's not a lot of dissimilarities between them. There's a lot of complementary things going on in both of them. I don't know if there are, I'm sure there are musicians in your audience, Stefan, and I know there's some in the studio audience here that we steal from each other, and we're shameless about it. We try not to be totally plagiaristic, but for example, with Matilda's Dance, I'm stealing from Banjo Patterson, which is in 1880 something that to come up with Waltzing Matilda. So we all borrow and derive from other musicians.
Well, we'll say pay an homage to maybe versus stealing. So in keeping along with the musical theme of the show, what are you going to play for us next, Bob?
Well, this one is influenced by an event that happened. I was in an airport hotel waiting for a very early flight out, and couldn't get enough sleep because there was just constant traffic in the hotel hallways. And I got a line in my head. The songwriting gods threw a line into my head. You wake up to the sounds intruding through the hotel room door. I thought, well, where do I go with that line? And cast my mind back to my earlier career. I was a computer geek for a long time, traveling around the world, fixing other people's computers. So I dusted off some memory neurons and thought about my life as a computer geek. This is called Chasing the Sirens, and the sirens are not ambulance chasing. It's the sirens from Greek mythology luring Ulysses onto the rocks. You wake up to the sounds intruding through the hotel room door. Another 5:30 alarm call, another taxi, another plane. If it's Tuesday, this is Montreal. Tomorrow night, you'll be in Rome. An endless trail of meetings becoming ever more mundane. Building castles in the air, grabbing the brass ring. Chasing rainbows' ends, forging illusions. Started out so eagerly, in those days you were driven to succeed. Going home or going out, the golden chalice was your chosen aim. You listened, working like a galley slave, never finding time to let go. You can't remember when it changed, when you started to lose the flame. Building castles in the air, grabbing the brass ring, chasing rainbows and forging illusions. The meeting room is tense, players angle for position in the game. Cups of coffee stand untouched, all the faces carry insincere smiles. You listen half anesthetized to words exploding like a wave on rocks. But you no longer hear the sirens, no longer feel the passion or the thrills. Days drag by like empty silhouettes, each one like the one before. Every time you try to change direction, someone drags you back into the drill. So tear the walls around you down, raise your voice above the wind, and never sigh what might have been, but only ever ask what will. There are no castles in the air, the ring is turned to dust. There's no pot of gold, only illusions. You wake up to the sounds intruding through the hotel room door.
And that was Chasing the Sirens by Bob Ardern. We will be back with more music from Bob on the Conquerall Mills Music Show after the break. And we are live off the floor at Conquerall Music with Bob Ardern for the Conquerall Mills Music Show on 88.7 Cove FM. What are you going to play for us next, Bob?
I've got a piece called Sangiovese, which is an Italian grape variety that's the active ingredient in Chianti, inspired from a trip to Tuscany that we took a few years ago.
I'm going to try to get the title of that song right. That was Sangiovese?
Close.
I tried.
It's a soft G. Sangiovese.
Sangiovese from our musical guest this evening, Bob Ardern. And over the last break, I had a couple audience members have some questions that they wanted me to pose to you. So it's time for a new segment on the Conquerall Mills Music Show called Questions from the Audience.
I need advance notice of that question.
So one of the questions that was asked, you're here performing as a solo performer tonight, and we know that you have done some collaboration work in the past. Have you ever played in a band before? Do you play with other bands sometimes? Or
I'm not sure if you could call it a band. When I got back into music seriously, I did have a musical partner in Ontario. Her name was Jennifer Ives. She calls herself the long-suffering Jennifer Ives. We had the duo had the name "Don't Panic," which falls out of one of your other questions that you had, which is "Don't Panic" is it's a phrase from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, and we were both big Douglas Adams fans, and it sort of fell in perfectly into place that. I was the don't half, and she was the panic half. So we played together for I can't remember now, 6 years, and then I moved to Nova Scotia, and she stayed there, so the band broke up.
Okay, and that kind of leads into another question that another audience member had, and that was how you wound up in Nova Scotia. Where are you originally from, and how did you get here?
Well, as I said earlier, I was born in England, and we moved here. We emigrated when I was a teenager, and I lived most of my life. I was going to say my adult life, but I'm a musician, so I haven't really grown up yet. I spent most of my adult life in Ontario, and then Julia and I came to Nova Scotia on vacation. I had never been east of Montreal, in Canada at least. I'd been as far as Montreal, but I had never come to the Maritimes. And Julia said, we should go there. It's a great place. And we wound up in Lunenburg after a few days on a couple of days on Cape Breton, a few days in PEI. And she said, we got to go to Lunenburg. It's a lovely spot. And we wound up buying a house that weekend. It was an incredibly impulsive thing to do. So we got back to Ontario at the end of the vacation and panic phone calls to real estate agents, sell my house now. And took us a while to get out of Ontario and get rid of all of our Ontario stuff and trappings. But we've been here, we've owned the house since 2006, and I've been living in Nova Scotia since 2007.
Great.
And love it.
And we've got one more question from the audience. This is something that you were talking about right before we started recording again, and Adam was mouthing this to me, so this comes straight from the control room. He was wondering why one set of your nails is shiny and the other set of your nails is not shiny.
Well, I play fingerstyle guitar, as you said, and the fingernails on my left hand are natural. Or on my right hand, sorry, and on the left hand they're cut very short so that they don't get in the way of the strings. And the reason that my right hand fingernails are shiny is because I put nail gel on them. Basically, it's just an acrylic nail polish from the ladies' nail department out at Walmart. And it keeps them strong. They break fairly easily if I don't put something on them, so it's just a strengthening agent so that they last. I wreck them every time I play. The polish comes off, but so
you have to be diligently polishing those nails from time to time, then, eh?
Pretty much, yeah. I pretty much have to renew it before every gig. If I'm doing a sort of two 45-minute, 50-minute sets, it's half gone by the time I'm done. So yes, I know far more about nail polish than most straight men.
Yeah, I imagine the steel strings probably do take a toll, and I know from what little finger picking that I've done on the guitar that after a little while of doing it, they do get sore and start to chip and break down a little bit.
Well, this is actually holding up reasonably well, but I refreshed it this afternoon before I came over here. So
give it a top coat just to make sure.
Yeah. I've got one piece that does a lot of reverse hand strumming, so I'm strumming the back of the fingernails, and it's gone by the time I finish that particular piece if I play it.
Well, I think that covers all of the questions from the audience. This concludes questions from the audience on the Conquerall Mills Music Show. You had touched on something when you were talking about the duo that you had back in Ontario, and you mentioned being a fan of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, written by Douglas Adams. And I'm wondering what it is about that book that inspires you and how that's influenced your music.
I just like the way he uses the English language. If you haven't read The Hitchhiker's Guide, I would strongly urge you to go out and get a copy of it. It's incredibly funny. It's a 6-part trilogy. There are 5 parts written by Douglas, and then he tragically had a heart attack at age 49. And somebody finished off the last part that he had working on. So it's basically a 6-part, 3-part series. And I started reading it many, many years ago and was just blown away by his incredibly funny use of the English language, and just love it. It's creative in ways that you just don't see where his joke is coming from until it smacks you in the face. So I just have a great respect. And it's the same with songwriters. Clever songwriters who are good with the use of the English language appeal to me.
Well, in the interest of keeping the show rolling, you've got one more tune for us tonight, Bob. What is your last song for us this evening?
Well, you can't live in Nova Scotia without having a sailing song, so this is mine. Ocean with nowhere to hide from the wind. Out here all you see are the stars. 45 ships full of oil, full of guns, full of friends. Aircraft to cover us, long since returned to the shore. A screen of destroyers urge the stragglers in. Sheep which I fear the wolf will sooner find. Neptune, I pray to you, save me from Davy Jones' locker. King Neptune, I pray to you, save me from Davy Jones' locker. 5 days from Halifax, 10 more on the deeps. On the charts it doesn't seem far. A 4-hour watch, the coffee to keep us awake. Search in the distance for ghosts that trigger alarms. Hoping for weather that keeps the U-boats from sight. Waiting for day, they'd rather attack at night. Neptune, I pray to you, save me from Davy Jones' locker. King Neptune, I pray to you, save me from Davy Jones' locker. There's a woman who waits on a Halifax pier, wants me to settle in Nova Scotia. Life on the waves is losing its luster. I've been too long flying the red duster. still crackles the air. Stay alert, the danger remains. Well, it might be our comrades or us in a cascade of flame. Or it might be we're safe and the wolf packs have missed us this time. Western approaches will gather us into their arms and turn us around, reload and set sail again. Neptune, I pray to you, save me from Davy Jones' locker. King Neptune, I pray to you, save me from Davy Jones' locker. Neptune, we pray to you, save us from Davy Jones' locker. Oh, King Neptune, we pray to you, save us from Davy Jones' locker.
And that was the last song by our performer tonight, Bob Ardern, called Convoy. Bob, I want to thank you so much for coming in and playing the show tonight. Let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for coming out and listening, and thank you in Radio Land when it gets there. And if you've enjoyed it half as much as I have, then I've enjoyed it twice as much as you.
And just before I let you go and I wrap the show up, if people are looking to find out more about you or hear more of your music, where can they go to get that information?
I have a website that's quite active, bobardern.ca, BOBARDERN.ca. And the music's there. You can listen to it online. You can buy CDs, physical CDs or downloads if you don't want to buy the physical CD. And some of the new stuff is on SoundCloud. If you search for me on SoundCloud, you can find a few draft mixes of some of the new stuff that's not out in the real world yet, but it's out there for you. Give it a listen, feed it back to me, and tell me what you think. So basically, it's my website.
Perfect. And I'll make sure that gets included when the show gets posted, that link goes with the promotion for that. So if people want to check it out, they can click right on it. It'll take them right to your website.
And it's on iTunes. I'm on iTunes as well, like pretty much every other musician in the world.
Well, that's a wrap for our show this evening. A big thank you to our live studio audience and our listeners at home for being with us this evening. The Conquerall Mills Music Show is hosted, produced, and mixed by Stefan Ramey, and our recording engineer for tonight's show is Adam Fancy. To hear this evening's episode and other previous broadcasts, please visit our YouTube channel at Conquerall Music. Please don't forget to subscribe and like our videos. You have been listening to the Conquerall Mills Music Show on 88.7 CKVE Cove FM and online at covefm.com. Please keep the dial tuned to Cove for Time Machine with Bob McDonald at 9 p.m. Have a great evening.